resources, and we are financially innumerate. We don't understand compounding. It doesn't come naturally to us, right? So number two. Number three, the fact that education, and this, Biju, I thought you would cover this, but I'm going to do it. The fact that educating people about how to therefore make decisions or how to think financially or financial literacy is not, it's important, not enough, because imagine, so we can do a lot of, and behavioral economics has had success, I cannot take it away, has had success in highlighting salient pieces of information so that from all of this nonsense that we're reading, highlighting salient pieces of information so that we can make a little better choices. Even if heuristic choices, we at least use the right heuristics, right? So that's where behavioral economics has had some influence, right? But communication, again, right, the amount of communication we're dealing with, the amount of complexity we're dealing with is not enough to change behavior. And Biju talked about how a lot of the factors that affect our behavior, we don't even know are doing it, right? We don't know, we are not conscious of the fact that we are making a decision because of all of these factors, right? So talking to just that 5% that we're aware of, or questioning the 5% that we're aware of is not enough, right? That's point number three. Point number four, is in 2000, I think the Obama administration, 2008-ish, right, is when a lot of evidence-based policies started getting accepted, right? So people were okay with, evidence-based findings coming into policy. There were RCTs, there were a lot of these things that were, openness increased, right, to some of this. And point number five, which is a boon and a bane, right, was the ease and simplicity of nudge, right? And so nudges came, and nudges are defined, and this definition is a little bit problematic, right? But nudges are defined as, I'm not taking on Sunstein, I'm just saying, right? Nudges are defined as low cost, lower risk effort interventions that can change behavior, which still maintains freedom of choice, right? And it is also not extreme incentives, so extreme differences to incentives, and this is what nudge is in a nutshell, right? Now, so with nudge, and the problem with nudge also is the fact that it started getting seen as behavior scientists, we looked at it and we talked about it as wow, right? Like we can fix all of these behavior science problems with this toolkit, right, that we have. And this kind of, the books came up, right? It got into public, books and pop culture, right? And what happened as a result is companies, policy making machines, everybody started looking at behavioral economics synonymous with nudges, right? And this meant that they were looking for quick fixes, they were looking for band-aids, and I do want to again at this point talk about what the panelists said. One of the questions was, what is the acceptance of research, right? So this is itself such a heavy question, because when we as behavioral science practitioners, we go and tell a company that to do this, right, I need to understand the context, right? I need to understand in Kenya, what girls are thinking, right, before they're buying or not using using a condom, right? I need to understand what the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana accounts that we just started, and we said, the government said go and start these accounts, and bank managers were incentivized to start these accounts, and they went and started these accounts, and the lower economic classes didn't use it, right? Now, this is what I mean by we need to understand, right, why some of these things don't work. So then as projects, they would come to us and say, let's kind of help fix these problems. Let's get people to use the bank accounts, like Divya said, let's get people to use credit cards, let's get people to do this and that. And when we go back and say, you need to kind of serve your time to be able to do that, right? Sometimes 2 years, sometimes 1 year. Development sector the research takes inordinate amount of time, and as it should, because otherwise you're left with scaling problems and you're left with, I shall come to, right? But so that is what you're left with, right, if you don't do your due research. And that doesn't go down very easily when you tell people who are expecting quick fixes. So a big problem with behavior science and behavioral economics is the expectations that we have managed to set ourselves, right, and the world has out of it, right? Even 8 years before, it's getting much better now, but 8 years ago, behavioral economics meant application of nudges, right? And that I think was a big problem for us. We're slowly still not managed managed to climb out of that hole we dug for ourselves. We're slowly getting there. We're getting better at it. But one of that's why I thought that was interesting, that people still question, do we know this, right? They question us saying, can we do this without the research, right? Can you just off the shelf, they don't say this, but it would be analogous to off the shelf picking a nudge and saying, this is the problem, let me pick this nudge and let me stick it, and here, let's test, right? Which is, again, gets me all riled up, so I will not go down that route. The second problem we have is to not recognize. So behavioral economics is not nudges. It goes beyond, and I'm going to give you examples of what I mean by it goes beyond, right? I think there was a question to the last panel, there was a question that said, why do you come in and try to fix it when you know that, you should probably have it in the design? Well, I'm paraphrasing that question, but it's better off in the design of the product itself, right? And Nikhil was very right about the nascency of the field and so on and so forth, but we do know better now, right? When you're designing a product, again, I'm going to come back to the PMJDY accounts example, right? We took accounts, savings accounts that the white, all of us, or the industrialized world, very rich people use, and we said, go give that. That is the product that the poor needs to now start using. And how is that going to work? Because their context, how they save, how they spend, how they borrow, my God, and how they pay back what they borrow, very, very, very different from how we do it, right? So sitting in this wall, if I say, let's go and take these exact same savings accounts and go go give them and they will use it, big problem, right? And that's what I mean by instead. If we had designed financial products that the lower economic strata could use, we would be not, it's a downhill problem of now get them to use it, right? So many examples in that regard, right? So that's number two, is let behavioral science do its job in different parts, right? Don't let it only be a fixing part. Think about policy, right? Now, behavioral science can be informing regulatory policies, not just in the way of applying nudges, right? But in the way that, so suppose somebody comes up and says, I know how to take, get women to take, iron supplements during their pregnancy, right? And you come up, they've done their research, they've come up with such a huge bunch of, and you spent money on it, right? And they come up with a huge bunch of interventions. You policymakers should be able to take one look at it. And this is why it's so important to get behavioral sciences learning or understanding as an explanatory study in policy, because they should be able to take a look at it and say, this won't work. This will not, there's no point putting this out onto the field because this won't work. It's not talking to the people who are facing scarce resources. It's not talking to them in their tunnel. It's talking to them outside of their tunnel, right? So this is not going to work, right? You can take products which are going to go out, and you're doing consumer research. Now we're talking about companies, right? But you're doing consumer research to launch a new product into the market, right? Behavior science people, if you had a team that had some behavior science knowledge, and I'm not saying behavior scientists, right? If you understood how humans decide and how humans make decisions, you could say this product needs X, Y, Z things fixed before you can launch it, right? Or this product needs, if you're doing communication, this product needs to be communicated differently to X audience, Y audience, Z audience, right? So once, this one size does not fit all. I know it's a tough pill to swallow to a lot of people who are buying behavioral science, but it's a pill that you have to swallow because one size does not fit all, right? So when you're talking about the future of behavior science for us, right, as practitioners, I think find ways that you can kind of, and Biju mentioned this, right, saying there is no one model of human behavior, right? There are so many, and so you're putting together all of these and it's bound to be complex, right? So if you're looking at that, then I would say let's invest more time in understanding our processes, right? Understanding the expectations we have out of these processes. And this brings me to one more point that I wanted to make, right? A lot of the cases, in a lot of places, regulation does better. And it's very painful to accept this as a behavior scientist. But if you don't pay heed to that, right, that regulation, you can be not wanting to be paternalistic all you like, right? And if you're happy with 1% to 4% changes, that's fine, right? Because that's what behavior science out there in the field, in real life, the kind of interventions we do today, we could be doing better ones, like I said, but the kind of interventions we do today offers you anywhere between a 0.065 1%. These are the kind of effect sizes that it has, right? If you're happy with that, that's great, because it is significant. Imagine rolling out something to the population of India at scale. 1% is a lot, right? So that is number one. If you're not happy with the 1%, think more paternalistic, right? Don't think libertarian paternalism. It's time to say that maybe we need, for climate change, we need more rigorous, stricter measures. And maybe you look at communicating those measures better so that people don't come up in arms against you, right? So their behavior science can help too. So number two, so that was the other point that I wanted to make, is it's okay to sometimes say that regulation can do a better job. It's okay, you're not losing, right? Number three, and that's why the way I love that seven things that she talked about as the sins of behavior science. I love it so much. Number three is the fact that, so we talked about managing expectations. We talked about to come before in the funnel, right? Just, number three, just improve the interdisciplinary aspect of it. If you're working in policy, have some people working behavior science working with you, or people who understand behavior science working with you, right? And as far as jobs go, so I don't need to talk about the future of behavior science, because all of them mentioned they went from 6-panel behavior scientists to 30-panel and 50-panel and 60-panel, right? So jobs-wise, security-wise, there is no better time to kind of invest in behavior sciences. We are at a very turbulent time, like I have just, with all of the pain that I'm talking about, we are in a very turbulent time, but that just challenges us to kind of introspect and do better, right? To be able to, talk about what we do, expectation setting, design better experiments. I'm coming to the last point, right? And this was eye-opening for me. So we had designed, for the same thing, for the iron supplements for women, in one of the rural areas in India, we had designed an intervention, and I think it went to CSBC and Ashoka, right? And then I was having many years later, and then a lot of the times, by the way, the interventions don't see the light of day, because when we are designing the interventions as behavioral scientists, we don't think about scale, right? And we don't know enough about how policymakers are thinking at scale, right? And I think it has to go both ways, in the sense that, so Cheshta came back and told me, she said, I had we had to look at the cost feasibility study of kind of tearing these calendar, that was one of the, I think, interventions, right? Women tearing the calendar to kind of mark that, that sense of progress and all of it, right? And she said, right now it is costing 10 paise a woman to kind of roll out these interventions. And this intervention, even with all of the scale that I could muster, all of the price things that I could muster, would have cost 150 rupees from 10 paise. So of course it didn't see the light of day, but had we known, as behavior scientists, had we had even a clue of how economics works at scale, right? I think we'd be doing a much better job of designing behavioral interventions in the first place, right? So it goes both ways, in the sense that as much as we want behavior science to be interdisciplinary in all of these design, right? I can't think of design even working without behavior science. We need to have, if you want to be a practitioner, learn statistics, right? Learn, go and learn economics, right? Go do all of that, because otherwise you're sitting in a little cocoon, research, consumer research, all of it, right? Otherwise you're sitting in a cocoon and thinking you're making the world a better place, but there is so many things that you're doing wrong, which you will only come to know later. We chalk it down to the failure of implementation, but there are, think about it, right? Companies are used to doing things in a certain way, right? And you can't go and disrupt and give them a solution that kind of disrupts the way that they're doing things and expect there to be uptake. So it's a massive challenge to get your acceptance rates up, to get your interventions applied, but face that challenge, right? And do whatever you can to kind of help those acceptance rates and everything get better. So if you look at the future of behavioral economics, it is all of this, right? We have a lot of problems to fix before, not that the demand is anywhere close to come down for behavior scientists, it's just going up. But with this increase in demand, it's the best time of our lives to be in behavior science. With this, just educate ourselves also, right, as much as the others and the policymakers and the companies. And companies out there, if you're not using behavior science and if you're dealing with consumers, I think please, there's a bunch of books that I will give to you. Please read, please just acknowledge the importance of it, because you're losing unnecessary money. You don't need to be. But yeah, I think I will, at that note, end my talk here. Thank you so much, folks. Yes.
Hi Divya, thank you for that. That was lovely.
Thank you.
But I have a question for you around the last few pieces that you said, which sounded so much like the domain I come from, which is design. So my question is, where did design fail that we needed one more domain that's doing pretty much the same interdisciplinary, caring for the other, imagining a good world, world making? Where did design fail?
So, you know what, and we work, so I can't, again, behavior science is just insights, right? Without design, there's no applying it in the real world, right? And therefore, it's literally the same process that you and me are talking about. We're talking about research and so on and so forth, right? I don't know enough to say where design failed, unfortunately, but I do know that design, as much as behavior science, as much as number crunching and all of it, research, we all use, even to this date, a post narrative to kind of fit in our design with what we want it to accomplish, right? And research has been about that for a long time, that we use a post narrative to fit in what we think early on are the solutions, right? To fit it into the brief, to fit it into the process itself. And I think there we are all going to have a reckoning if we don't kind of deal with that part, right? So that's one aspect. I'm sure there are many more, but no problem.
Hi Divya, thanks for the super energetic talk and helping us beat our afternoons long. So, I just have one question. Like you talked about, basically you gave two examples, the policy and the situation in Nigeria.
Yeah.
And rather than pulling out off-the-shelf solutions and investing more in research, can you just expand a little bit on that? Like, I'm curious to.
Yes, so I'll give you an example which I read, right? Of course, there's so many from our work which we could cite, but this one is fresh in my head because it was very interesting. So there was this study that was look at how people make decisions in stressful situations, right? And they were doing it with teenage girls in Kenya about how, in stressful situations, how do you get them to work? And therefore, a research study said, now we need to put people in stressful situations, right? So this was obviously come up with from one of the Princetons or the Stanfords or the UCLs of the world, right? And therefore they went to them, and the way that they thought they would put them in a stressful situation is by making them do a public speaking interview kind of a thing, right? So they said, so the judges all sat with white coats, so that they look like doctors or whatever, and then they made these girls go up and public speak, right? And everything failed. All of the stuff that came out of that research, it didn't even show that stressful situations were created, first of all, for that experiment to happen. Now they looked at why, right? Apparently in Kenya, public glossophobia or public speaking is not, it's not a thing. They're doing that from when they are kids, right? In the churches, in their communities, they're all raised to be vocal, right? Number two, white coats and then they apparently, one of them made a remark that said, why are you having butchers to judge us, right? So white coats in Kenya are worn by butchers when they're and so this completely, what was supposed to be a stressful situation is now they think it's a big joke because butchers are sitting, leave the stress out of it, right? So the power of context or the situation that you're looking to do your research in is so immensely important. And I'm going to talk about one point because you brought it up, right? And missed it in my talk. 4%. So if you look at behavioral science research studies, right, about 8% of them are found to be effective, right? That's the effect size of behavior science research studies. And then, like I said, when we go out into the world, it drops to 1%, 0.6, 0.5, which are all still significant, but it drops. The reason it drops is because when we do this, when we're scaling solutions, we lose some of this contextual information that we have, right? Well, that's one factor, but it is a significant factor to the drop in effect sizes. I think we're running out of time. I'm at LinkedIn, wherever. If you want to reach me, just drop in a note, and I'm here after also. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Divya, for that informative talk. I invite Dr. Charles Lasrado, SJ, to felicitate our speaker.